This presentation was published as part of the Open Educational Resources Archive by the InclusiveGameLab. InclusiveGameLab is a project that was funded by the German Ministry of Research, Technology and Space and realized by the University of Applied Sciences Cologne and the Department for Youth Media Culture, North Rhine-Westphalia. The topic of today's presentation is disability representation. While mainstream games have moved beyond the exclusive focus on white male heroes and damsels in distress, representation in games remains uneven. In particular, disabilities and other forms of marginalization are still significantly underrepresented, especially in high-budget AAA titles. Even if characters with disabilities do appear, they are often portrayed through narrow and problematic tropes, as tragic figures, villains, or characters whose narrative purpose is tied to suffering, loss, or the need to be quote-unquote fixed. Such portrayals rarely reflect real lived experiences. As such, disability in games is frequently framed as a deficit or a dramatic narrative device rather than as one aspect of a multifaceted character. Unrealistic depictions, such as blind characters with exaggerated superhuman abilities, further reinforce misconceptions and reduce narrative credibility. Overall, games tend to lack diversity within disability itself, overlooking the fact that disabled people are not a homogeneous group but have varied identities, personalities, and lived realities. For developers, this is not only a social issue, but also a creative and commercial one. Authentic representation can deepen world building, create more compelling characters, and expand the potential audience. Players are more likely to engage with stories that reflect a broader range of experiences and allow for genuine identification. Meaningful improvement requires more than adding disabled characters as symbolic gestures. Disability should be treated as a natural part of the game world, neither a problem to be solved nor a plot device. Crucially, people with disabilities should be actively involved in game development as writers, consultants, and testers. Successful examples such as Hellblade demonstrate that close collaboration with affected communities leads to more credible narratives and richer gameplay experiences. Inclusive development practices ultimately result in stronger stories, wider market reach, and more resilient player communities. Let's first talk about some positive examples from recent gaming history. Senua, the protagonist of Hellblade, is a Celtic warrior who experiences severe psychosis. The game portrays her mental illness through both narrative and sensory design, for example, visual hallucinations and binaural audio to simulate the voices in her head. The developers at Ninja Theory spent years collaborating with neuroscientists and consulting people with lived experience to ensure a respectful and authentic depiction. As a result, Hellblade is widely praised for allowing players to empathize with Senua's struggles without reducing her to a stereotype, making it a standout example of positive disability representation. Furthermore, rather than overcoming her condition or being magically cured of it, Senua learns to accept herself and live with the voices in her head, as is shown in the second game, Senua's Saga. Kotalo is an NPC in the game Horizon Forbidden West, and a proud warrior who lost his left arm in battle. Initially, Kotalo faces stigma in his tribe, which prizes physical strength due to his injury. Over the course of the story, he remains a capable fighter and regains his sense of honor. With Aloy's help, Kotalo builds a prosthetic arm, and yet importantly, he chooses to use it only when necessary, as he comes to accept his disability as part of himself. He rejects the notion that he must be fixed to be whole. Kotalo's portrayal as a disabled badass is a refreshing example of positive representation, showing a character who adapts to limb loss without being defined by it. As one disabled veteran fan put it, there's a lot of grace and strength in being a wounded warrior. One of the main characters in Watch Dogs 2 is Josh Sawchek, a young man on the autism spectrum. Ubisoft treats Josh's character with care and avoids lazy tropes, its narrative never infantilizing Josh. He's a talented coder without falling into the autistic super genius trope. Rather, he's part of a team of geniuses, so his skills don't single him out as an anomaly. Josh also has noticeable autistic traits, like speaking in a monotone voice and occasionally missing social cues that are presented matter-of-factly as just a part of who he is. He stims in the game, has instances of self-soothing mechanisms such as palilalia, which are repeated words of self-soothing, and rocking motions, and moments of hyperfixation and meltdowns. When an outsider patronizes him, Josh cleverly turns the tables on them, underscoring he's not defined by his diagnosis. This portrayal has been praised as really good representation of autism in games, a multidimensional character whose neurodivergence is only one aspect of his identity, handled with realism and respect. As Josh puts it himself, I like who I am. I might not like who I would be if I didn't have Asperger's. Final Fantasy XV features Ignis Scientia, one of the player's 3 companions who becomes blind about 3/4 through the story. Notably, the game continues with Ignis as an active party member after his injury. The narrative shows his friends awkwardly learning how to assist without pitying him, and Ignis asserting his independence and desire to keep fighting alongside them, not without moments of vulnerability and frustration. In one powerful scene, Ignis insists that it's his choice whether he carries on in battle despite his blindness, defying attempts to sideline him. He remains blind for the rest of the story, including a 10-year time skip, and in that time he adapts and continues kicking ass as a strategist and fighter. Many players and critics consider Ignis' arc inspiring, one of the best disability representations in gaming, as it avoids the miraculous cure and inspiration porn cliches, instead treating him as a capable hero who happens to have a disability. Haley Cooper is a black, deaf street artist who lives in Harlem. She communicates with Miles Morales using American Sign Language, which is accurately animated in the game. Her character was created in collaboration with deaf consultants and performed by a deaf actress. The game uses authentic ASL, narrated captions, and respectful writing, making her deafness a natural and positive part of her identity. Haley is portrayed as creative, independent, and a valuable friend to Miles, with her deafness naturally integrated into her character and not as a limitation or a central issue. She is not defined by her disability, and her story and contributions are meaningful, making this a standout example of respectful and inclusive representation in gaming. Now, of course, we also need to talk about some negative examples to point out what to avoid when portraying disabilities. Billy Lurk is a former assassin who loses her right eye and arm in the events between Dishonored 1 and 2. While a disabled Billy does appear in Dishonored 2, the game gives the player an optional chance to magically undo her injuries via time travel. The next installment, Death of the Outsider, assumes that her disabilities were cured, making that the canonical version. To make things worse, Death of the Outsider then subjects Billy to a gruesome scene where a deity figure rips off her arm and eye yet again, only to replace them with supernatural powers. This narrative whiplash, effectively fixing a disabled character only to use the trauma for shock value and then equip her with magical replacements, suggests that even in a fantasy world, a disability won't be allowed to stand. Critics argue that this portrayal treats disability as something that must be erased or compensated for, rather than letting Billy live as an empowered character with her disabilities. Life is Strange is critically acclaimed for its storytelling. Nonetheless, it stumbles in its description of a character's disability in an alternate timeline scenario. In episode 4, protagonist Max uses time travel to prevent her friend Chloe from ever having been in a past accident. But this change leads to a new timeline where Chloe is paralyzed from the neck down. The game then presents Chloe's life with quadriplegia as tragically limited. It emphasizes her parents' financial and emotional strain, Chloe's pain and slow respiratory failure, and her belief that she's become a burden. In a distressing culmination, Chloe asks Max to assist her in ending her life, implying that death is preferable to living with her disability. Because Max inevitably reverses this timeline, restoring Chloe's able-bodied reality, the sequence comes across as framing Chloe's paralysis as a punishment or worst-case outcome of Max's meddling. Many players and disability advocates have criticized this plotline as ableist, as it sends an implicit message that a severely disabled life is not worth living, reinforcing harmful stereotypes that disability equals hopelessness. This pernicious narrative is known as the better dead than disabled trope. Wolfenstein 2 falls into tropes in how it handles disabled characters. Caroline is a strong tactician and moral center who is only able to actively fight after she dons an exoskeletal Iron Man suit that overrides her paralysis. The criticism is that designers could not imagine a wheelchair-using character contributing in battle without literally strapping her into a machine that lets her walk and fly. Tellingly, Caroline is then killed early in the story, shortly after this temporary fix. Meanwhile, Max Hass exemplifies the strong but childlike stereotype. He has an intellectual disability and can only say a few words, but possesses inhuman strength, which is treated as his primary value to the team. This portrayal echoes a common media trope that unintentionally dehumanizes, suggesting a person with cognitive disabilities is only useful as muscle, lacking other agency. Our last example today is The Quiet Man. The Quiet Man is widely criticized for its poor representation of deafness and deaf and hard of hearing culture. The design choice to remove audio without adequate alternatives, meaning no subtitles for most dialogue, makes the story practically incomprehensible. And ironically, it excludes deaf or hard of hearing players too, since the game provides little textual feedback. Dane's deafness comes off as a superficial gameplay gimmick rather than an authentic identity trait. For example, he never uses sign language or any culturally deaf mannerisms. He simply lip reads and moves through the story as if his deafness were just a minor quirk. The game's trailers and scenes even include dramatic sounds and music, undercutting the supposed soundless world. It fails to show how being deaf truly affects Dane's interactions or the gameplay, as it doesn't embrace deaf perspective. It merely mutes the audio. As one critique put it, this feels reminiscent of stories that put a character in a wheelchair or give them a missing limb, but then negate their disability with special powers or technology. A community member of the Reddit subreddit Dev commented that we're most likely dealing with a developer who came up with an interesting idea for gameplay mechanic and a company that doesn't necessarily understand the implications it has for the deaf and hard of hearing community.